My name is Joel Kleber and I host a podcast which is called The Lived Experience. And this month is Mental Health Month. So you're going to see a lot of posts online regarding people's experiences with depression and anxiety mainly. And I want to share with you a personal story regarding my experience growing up with a single parent who has bipolar disorder. There's a lot of crazy things that happened growing up, and I just wanted to share a personal story with you to make you realize that during this month, when you're going to see a lot of stuff online, that there's a lot more to it than just depression and anxiety. I want to share you a story that happened to me about 5 years ago on Christmas Eve, where it just shows you that there's more mental illness awareness as opposed to just talking about depression and anxiety all the day. So the system from my experience is still extremely broken, with emergency departments, nurses and ambulances and police being the first people on hand to deal with people who are having a psychotic or manic episodes. Around 5 years ago, I had an experience where my mother had a manic episode on Christmas Eve. Now, I won't go in too depth into what was happening, but basically she was sitting in a recliner. Her eyes were going back and forth like she was watching a Formula One car go back and forth. She was talking a million miles an hour, and we don't think she slept much in 3 to 4 days. So she was very unwell. And then what had to happen is, though, we had to call an ambulance because the ambulance had to come take her for an assessment down at the local emergency ward, and then she could get put into the psychiatric ward there. Now, you think that'd be a very easy experience, but it's a very hard one, and which I'm going to go on a bit about. So prior to her being manic on Christmas Eve, we knew she was having issues, and basically I've been through this for many years growing up with this, and the frustrating thing is when you know there's issues, you're basically told we can't do anything until she gets really sick and made involuntary. You can't sort of just walk down there and you can't really make the person, even though they're going to be unwell or they are, who doesn't want to go there. So they have to be made involuntary, and generally what happens is the police or an ambulance will come up and then take the person to the emergency ward. They'll get assessed and away they go. But going through this multiple times, it's very frustrating, and it never gets any easier, even though I was in my probably late 20s at this time. So basically we had to call an ambulance. She was taken to the local emergency room, which shouldn't have to be the case. If you've got someone who's got extensive history or having an emergency, you would hope there'd be 24/7 care available to put someone in a psychiatric ward where they're protected. But you have to go through the process basically where they go to the emergency ward for an assessment. We took her there and we had to wait many hours. So we're there basically, she's gone in the ambulance, but we're then meeting her and my uncle, and we're waiting and all this sort of stuff, and we just couldn't calm her down. She's just going flat out 100 miles an hour, eyes are there and going back and forth, all these sorts of things. And it's something I've seen before, so I was quite used to it, but it's still very distressing on Christmas Eve because you want to come down, you think it's going to be a nice, let's say 6 or 7 days with family, and you have this sort of happen. So basically she was taken into the emergency ward. She's put on a bed there. And basically, she was being an absolute handful, and the staff probably had a gut full of her, and they were very short and losing her patience with her. So even though you can understand their position, it's still your parent. And if you see someone being rude to your parent or aggressive to your parent, you tend to be protective and narc up. So me personally, my natural thing is to stick up for her regardless of what she's doing or saying. And then basically there can be a fair bit of animosity in the room and a bit of tension. So lost my bit of my patience with my staff, which I do apologise for, but that's just the reality of it, of the mental illness, is when someone's having an issue, is that it can be very traumatic for everyone involved, and patience is wear thin. But it was very hard for me to see how nurses would deal with my mother, who's got a pretty bad mental illness, because they're still your parent. But saying that, this is a common thing. Nurses on every day have to deal with people presenting with mental health issues, and this is just another thing they have to do on the other things they have to do, so you understand. So basically what we're doing, she had to take up a bed. We were then forced to wait to have a mental health assessment, which was absolutely ridiculous, because if you just look up her name in the health system, if they did, they would see all the time she's been hospitalised, all these different things she's on, all this sort of stuff. But we had to go through the procedure. And that's the most frustrating thing, is when you know someone's unwell, you ask for help prior, you don't get anything. And then when you say, just look up her history, no, that doesn't matter, we have to do a mental health assessment so then we can go through. And then that was a very challenging thing, because they're asking relevant questions. They're asking things like, do you want to harm yourself? Do you have thoughts of suicide? Do you have thoughts of harming others? Do you hear voices? All this sorts of stuff. And she couldn't even answer the question. She's sitting in there, her eyes are going back and forth like this, and she's just speaking in 1,000 tongues, and this lady's just following procedure and having to do her job. But it just shows you how broken the system is, where you've got to, if someone's unwell, you can't get help prior. You have to get them to the emergency room where nurses don't really want to deal with them, and they shouldn't have to be honest. Then you have to wait for many hours. Then you have to go and get this psych assessment late at night just so them get them some actual help to be safe. And they're just doing this tick box when there's an extensive history there. It was very frustrating. It's still very frustrating. It happens all the time, or happened to me all the time, being used to it. But basically, when she was doing that psych assessment with the lady, same thing again. Tensions are high. I lost my cool a bit because she couldn't even answer the questions yet. They're trying to make her answer these questions, so I'm answering them for my behalf. So then, what's the point of doing this assessment? It's just a tick box for the government or for the hospital, so that then she can get the appropriate care in the bed. But yeah, it's very quite frustrating to go through that multiple times. So what happened after the mental health assessment is basically I was very tired and drained. I reckon it was probably been 2 a.m. in the morning whilst it eventually happened, and I eventually just ended up having enough and going home. Very traumatic experience. You come down on the way down in the car thinking, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing this person, all that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden it's wrecked because you can't get the appropriate care for the person prior to them having an episode. It just doesn't happen. And also the actual red tape and the experience in itself, and actually a person who's very unwell trying to get them from this point A to point B where they can be safe. And I reckon that probably took from 7 o'clock to probably maybe 2 to 3 a.m. And this is in a local country town where there's probably a 5-minute between her house and the hospital and the actual psych ward. So you're talking about from 7 to 2 just to get the appropriate care and support. Now, this is only 5 years ago. In my situation, I don't think much has changed to my knowledge. I know that there has been a Royal Mental Health, Royal Commission, all that sort of stuff. The thing that I'm describing to you now, as best as I can recall it, it still happens, and it puts a massive strain on our healthcare workers. So you've got COVID currently going on. You've got people with mental health issues, which has all of a sudden got an extra light shone on it. But you've got these nurses who are having to deal with all their normal stuff, plus these people like my mother coming in, which making it very hard for people. And it puts a further strain on them. And this whole thing where they've announced nearly $1 billion in mental health funding, that's fine. But I've been looking at a lot of research, and there's a report done by Bipolar Australia for the Royal Commission in 2018-2019, and they estimated that bipolar disorder every year cost $8 billion. And that's just one mood disorder, right? So you're looking at $1 billion to apparently fix and overhaul the system, yet you've got one condition which is currently costing the economy around $8 billion on average a year. And also from those stats in that report, it shows around 1,400 people who have bipolar commit suicide a year, which is a very big, large number, okay? So this is something where, even though we've got $1 billion put towards it, and we're going to have all this awareness, all these posts with celebrities and stuff talking about what they do for their mental health and stuff, there's still not enough. What is required is a far more larger investment, right, into mental health and the actual outcomes, and what are we actually doing to fix the system? What are we doing for 24/7 care? What are we doing to stop this situation happening when you have to wait from 7 to 2 o'clock to get someone who's in a manic episode actually into a safe place without having all this red tape, even though they've got an extensive history? So what are we actually doing with that money? It's not enough. And just by showing you that those numbers alone, there's a lot more people who are affected. You can speak better to me than this. What they don't get, the people, when they dish out their money, is they just don't understand the problem of how much the mental health stuff is costing the economy, whether it be schizophrenia, be bipolar, or the kids who have to live with people who have these conditions. There is a massive cost. We're talking tens of billions of dollars to the economy, yet we throw $1 billion trying to fix it. It needs to be more money. And what I hope as well is that if you have watched this to the end, thank you very much. Check out my podcast on my website, livedexperiencepodcast.com. But what we need to do is, if you've got stories similar to my really poorly told one, so sorry about that, I couldn't explain it better. I probably wrote it down a lot better on here, which I will put online. But if you do have a story which is other than, let's say, the depression and anxiety, which the awareness piece has been done to death on, right? You've got these massive brands who are doing great work and promoting all these numbers and stuff like that. But what's the actual system what's being fixed? What's the actual support in place? Where can you actually go and get help? Where can these children of these people go and get help? Where can these adult children actually get support that they need? Because there is not really that much available. So that $1 billion, whilst it sounds good in theory, is it going to actually fix a lot and reduce the cost of the economy with all these conditions? My answer is probably not. It needs to be seriously upped. And it's not just Victoria who needs to do this. It's the whole of Australia. We've been spending for decades that much we haven't been spending that much money on mental health. I remember the Liberal government one year spent, I think it allocated was 125 million. I'm probably wrong in that. If you are into politics, you're going to correct me on it. But $125 million, and I've just read out a stat regarding how much bipolar costs the economy every year, which is $8 billion. And you're throwing $125 million, this was back a while back, at a mental health system. Even $1 billion, as I said, is not enough. So more money, more resources. And if you do have a story, you need to share it, because what's happening is you've got this depression and anxiety awareness piece, which has been happening for a while, and I keep repeating myself on this, but it's what is actually being done. All right, reports are good, recommendations are good, but what is the actual thing that is being done? There is not enough. And if you are going to donate some money to causes this mental health month, please look for some smaller organisations, all right? I put a couple in this video link here in the description, but please spread the money around. There's massive brands who have done their job and done a great job of it, of creating awareness, but there is a lot more issues that don't get any attention and hardly any funding. So please make it your priority, if you are going to donate or do fundraising stuff for mental health, that you find a smaller organisation to throw your money behind. And if you are someone who's got personal lived experience like I do regarding living with someone who's got bipolar, you need to start speaking up about it, start sharing about it. If you are in a financial position, start donating regularly to organisations who do something about it, okay? Now, if you want to hear more, check out the Lived Experience podcast.com. You can search it obviously on Spotify and iTunes as well. And I will be doing more of this, so if you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below.